Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the webinar series on the occasion of PlayStreet's 10th year anniversary. As our regular participants may know, this is our fourth webinar in our series. And for those who are joining us for the first time today, please feel free to check out our previous three webinars on our YouTube channel. My name is Pranjali, and I am a special educator and psychologist at PlayStreet. And as you all may know, PlayStreet is an organization that provides educational services to help the child with special needs become independent and live up to their full potential. We also offer parent empowerment programs, integrated schooling programs, and a variety of clinical services. This year marks the 10th year running of PlayStreet. So we decided to bring you a series of 10 webinars, which will talk about small things to do at home to see many big changes. Today's experts are Abhishek, Phillip, and Sarah Abraham, and they will be talking about factors affecting feeding and strategies parents can use to support successful feeding. Abhishek is a speech language pathologist who has worked with many years with children with developmental disabilities. He is an extremely passionate therapist and individual who believes that every child is unique, and if we create a loving, understanding, and creative environment around them, we can bring out their capabilities and strengths and help them achieve the greatest of heights and success. Sarah is a speech language pathologist whose field of interest is developmental disability, developmental pediatrics, and she has experience in the same. She strongly believes that every child has a voice of their own and loves helping children bring out their voice to the world around them. Both of them are certified level 1 oral placement therapists. They work closely with parents and children to overcome their sensory motor, speech, and feeding challenges, thereby improving their quality of life. I will now hand over to Abhishek. If you have any questions, kindly use the chat box. We'll have a small Q&A at the end of the webinar. Abhishek.
First of all, thank you for all joining for this presentation. So the topic of our today's discussion is about feeding, understanding feeding skills, and about what are the factors that impacts feeding skills, which sometimes we miss out, or sometimes we don't see it as a great factor. And also, what are the management ideas or strategies that we can try to help these children. So going to the first part, we are going to see that understand the important factor that eating is an integral part of child's life. And eating is very important for that, because the child can have the nutritious food, and which in turn will help the child to achieve the child's neural development and achieve other areas, other development in other areas. So, but when you see feeding is more of an interaction between the child and the caregiver or the parent. So, and when it comes to management of treatment strategies, we need to consider not only the child, we need to look at the other factor, the other person, which is the parent or the caregiver. All right. So now, if we look at feeding difficulties, some children have feeding difficulties ranging from minor difficulty to severe difficulties. And the signs that the child shows are different from everyone. And according to one study, they say that, some of the common difficulties that's seen in children with feeding difficulties are prolonged meal time. They take more time to eat the food. Sometimes they take like 1 hour or more than 1 hour, and the child refuses the food, and the parent and the child will have stressful time running around feeding the child. So, and another thing can be inappropriate feeding, independent feeding, a lack of appropriate independent feeding, and mother or the father have to show a phone or a TV to make the child to feed. These are all showing that there is some underlying factor that is impacting the child's feeding, which we need to look into. So some of the signs of feeding difficulties which are commonly seen in children are like, they move back, sorry. they arch their back or stiffen when feeding, like when the mother or the father feeds the child goes back because of some reason. And can the child cry or fuss a lot when feeding? The child fall asleep when feeding, and the child refuse to eat or drink, pocket the food in the mouth, and have problems in chewing, cough, gag during meals. So these are some of the, not all the signs, but some of the signs that the child having some feeding difficulties, which we need to take into consideration because there is something that we need to look into. So what is the prevalence? What is the statistics talking about about how many children are having feeding difficulties? So if you see in preschool children, let's say the 3 years to 5-year-old children group, who are normal in having normal intellectual skills, they found that 25 to 35% of children have some kind of feeding difficulties. But when it comes to developmental disabilities or children who have some kind of disabilities, that percentage increases 40 to 80%, so which is really high. But again, if you see in the children with autism spectrum disorder, that goes even high. So almost 90% of the children have some kind of feeding difficulties. Again, it can go from minor difficulty to severe difficulties, and which need attention. So now it's important for us to know what are those factors that impacting the child's feeding skills. So, and I like to put this into 3 important blocks, basing from the physiology, then comes the motor skills, and then comes the learned behavior. So all 3 blocks are interconnected, and each interconnected and doesn't function separately. And all these 3 blocks are important for a successful feeding. Physiology means that how the brain and the body works, and motor skills means how the physical structure skills, like how the hand function are, and can the child take the spoon, scoop the food, and the fine motor skills, how the child's like how the child's finger skills, and how the child's chewing skills, those skills comes under the fine motor skills. And then comes the learned behavior, which we see out, like the one we see outside, like how does the child behave when when the parents gave food to the child. So that comes under the learned behavior. So these are the 3 important blocks which matters the feeding. Okay, so you can have put some parts in physiology, but there are more than this. But some of the important factors under physiology which are seen common, and also which are not given much importance, so in terms of feeding, or can impact feeding. So the first one is the anatomical status of the child. How does the child how does the child's oral structures look like? How does it appear? So if the child having any oral structural difficulties or structural abnormalities, that can have a great impact on the child's feeding skills. Let's say, for example, children with cleft lip palate, and they have an anatomical issue where the child has a fissure inside the palate, and that can have an impact on the child's breastfeeding, child sucking skills, and sometimes the child can have food coming through the nose. So that again is an issue. Then comes the tongue tie, lip tie, which most of the parents and think that is, some parents take it as an issue. Some parents are even in the medical field itself. There is some kind of, there is always different school of thoughts whether the child is having feeding difficulties because of the tongue tie or lip tie. But studies have shown that children who have lip tie or tongue tie can have issues in terms of chewing and good movement, lateral movement of the tongue and everything. The child have difficulty if they have tongue tie or lip tie. So another can be, the most common one can be the dental decay. So dental decay, or if the child have dental decays or like dental caries, the child can't chew properly. So the child will have, again, another feeding issue. So like that, we have sensory system, and then how feeding, like how we're going to see how in infancy, if there is an issues in the infant stage, how it can impact the child's later feeding skills. And then we're going to see how the child's emotional skills can affect feeding, and then medical issues and associated conditions. In sensory system, we need to understand that we are able to eat well because we have an adequate functioning sensory system. For example, we know the five sensory system. Along with that, we have proprioception and the vestibular system. These are the 7 important sensory systems which are important for our good, adequate eating skills. But anything happens within this sensory system that will have a definitive impact on their feeding. For example, when any of this sensory system, like let's say smell, taste, or the auditory function, or any of these skills works like less, or I would say like overactive, that means when the child finds that this stimulus is too much, then the child will have difficulty in feeding. For example, one of the signs with the child who have sensory difficulty, who have sensory overreactiveness shows like, when you give the food, the child goes back, or the child spits out, or the child doesn't like to eat much. And those are something that the child who have sensory overreactiveness. And same goes with similarly when it comes to underactive sensory system, where the children keep the food inside their mouth for a long time without swallowing the food, or the child will have drooling. So those are some of the signs that the child may have some sensory difficulties. So similarly goes with the sensory processing disorder. When any of these skills, any of the sensory difficulties, like any of these areas or a group of sensory skills are affected, that can cause a sensory processing disorder. So similarly, we have what happens in infancy. When a child is born before the gestational age, most likely that the child will have immature sensory system or immature physiological system, which is not ready for the child to have appropriate feel the appropriate food texture and have impact on the child's feeding. And same goes with if the child have early breathing difficulties, because breathing is one important area when it comes to proper eating. So, and if the child having early breathing difficulties can also have an impact on feeding. So the next one, we are going looking at the emotional factor. The specific one, I'm going to look at this condition called RFID, where it means that avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So what does that mean by is that this is something which was earlier diagnosed as selective eating disorder. But this is a new term for that, in which a child have difficulty in terms of child have aversion towards one food, a particular group of food, and the child will have less interested to eat or child will be interested only to eat limited kind of food, limited amount of food. And this is much different from the child with fuzzy eaters, because the child with RFID tend to avoid food most of the time. Even if they feel hungry, they would still avoid. And most of the time, the RFID co-occurs with child with anxiety disorder. And it's mostly can have chance to seen in children with autism spectrum disorder. So, and now we're going to look at the medical issues. Some of the medical issues which are commonly seen in children with feeding difficulties is that they can have reflux, where, or like we can call it as simply the acidity. That's what we call, right? So why the child tend to vomit because of some gut issues, or let's say the child vomit and the child feel more uncomfortable. Imagine that the one child feel more uncomfortable because of some physical or some gut issue, the child will definitely avoid the food. So which sometimes we don't take it seriously, and we would try to feed more because we think the child is not eating, and we'll overeat the child and cause more issues. So that is about some gut issues. And same goes with allergy and breathing difficulty. And next we have associated conditions. Like I said before, children with autism have a high chance of having some kind of feeding difficulties compared to normal intellectual skills, children with normal intellectual skills, or any other group of children. And similarly with ADHD. Okay, so now we kind of looked at what are the skills that comes under, what are the common issues or common areas that comes under the physiology. Now, let's look at the motor skills, another important area. In motor skills, we can divide it into two parts, gross motor skills and fine motor skills. Like, let's look at this picture of this child who's sitting on this chair and trying to have grapes. And if you see that, if you look carefully, you can see the child has a good sitting position, which is again which is one of the gross motor skills the child need to have for a self-feeding, or let's say like eating by himself. So the child need to have a proper, have a good, stable sitting position, and then comes the midline movement, where the child can take the food from the tray and move it across the midline and put it inside the mouth. So that's a midline movement. And the next comes the good core strength, good trunk support, which is an important factor comes to the gross motor skills. One thing we need to understand here is that gross motor skills is the foundation for the fine motor skills. So if we miss the gross motor skills, and if we directly work and look into the fine motor skills, usually that's what we all do, where the child is not eating. Okay, maybe something's wrong with the child's oral skills. So we think maybe the child is not chewing properly. Maybe I think there's something wrong with the child's tongue or child's mouth. We look into that without looking at the child's gross motor skills. So when we work or when we do the management, we need to look at this gross motor skills first, and while we support the fine motor skills. Again, if we go back to the this child as an example, when we take this child as an example, another important factor we need to understand is that, so we have this body part. These body parts needs to move separately, function separately, and you need to have adequate strength to work properly. For example, in this case, the child has to move the hand away from the body, or let's say this hand away from the body, and the child need to take the food, and the child need to put it inside the mouth, and the oral structures inside the mouth also have to function for a particular, they all need to function for one particular aim, which is to have the food, but they need to work separately. The tongue need to move separately from the oral structures, and the teeth need to function well. The lip need to function separately from the jaw, move separately from the jaw, need to have a good, proper eating. So the other fine motor skills are like biting, chewing, and swallowing. So like I said before, when we need to work on the fine motor skills, it is very important for us to look at the gross motor skills also. So at this moment, I want to give you one example here. Like when I wish to go to, or when I would like to go to a coffee shop, then you can understand there are different kinds of chairs. And when I go to this coffee shop, I always prefer to sit on a chair which has a handrest, or where I can sit properly and sit comfortably. I wouldn't prefer to sit on a high chair, which has a narrow surface area, and it can move around. The seat can circle around. So I don't really prefer to sit on that chair, because when I sit on that, I'm not really comfortable to eat my food. what I understand is that the reason why I can't do that because my gross motor skills and my fine motor skills are being challenged at that time. Because when my gross motor skills are not is being challenged, I feel really uncomfortable. Then I would be really interested to eat on that, sitting on that chair. So I would always would be prefer to sit on the normal chair, and then I will have my coffee. So, and most of the time, that is what happens when we feed the child. We think that seating is not an important factor. We will make the child sit on a high chair without providing adequate gross motor support. And you can see in this case, the child's leg is dangling here, and the child may not be really comfortable to have the food. Instead of that, you can see in the other picture on the other side, you can see the child is sitting on that similar high chair, but the leg is resting on a wooden platform. So the child feel much comfortable to have in that compared to the other one. So seating is one important factor which is often missed out. So we have covered the two parts, which is physiology and the gross motor and fine motor skills. Now, it is important for us to look at what are the factors affecting the child's eating behavior. This is equally important like the other three parts. And under these factors, I have put three important areas. One is parental influence, family, and food. So I would skip this one and then we'll come back again to the other previous slide. So the first one I want to talk about is the pressure. It is important for us to understand that pressure backfires all the time. And it is very common that, this is something like still being practiced in most of the culture, especially Indian culture, because we want our child to have good health, good nourishment. So we have this goal, and we will feed the child without respecting the child's interest, child's hunger, or child's thirst, and all those factors, without being respecting to those areas. So some of the common things that the parents do is that, for example, if you finish, I want you to finish this idli as quickly as possible. And then would be like, just this is the last bite you need to have. This is the last one. And after that, it's over. And another pressure that we commonly do is that I will be sad if you don't finish this. Another emotional blackmail, like, usually the parents do with their child. And another thing, like, quickly eat this food, otherwise the monster is going to come and catch you. So, and again, another one is like physically force feeding the child, tying, making the child sit on the lap and forcing the child to squeeze the food inside the mouth, physically into the mouth. So that's force feeding. Like in this picture, you can see that the child is literally saying, no, I don't want to eat the food. And the mother, I think mother or the father is trying to feed the child without respecting the child's response or the child's communication. Again, we need to understand that is at this moment is that, this feeding can have a great impact on child's communication. When the child is communicating something to us, non-verbally or verbally, we need to understand that, and we need to acknowledge that. And when we don't do that, of course, it's going to impact the child's communication and also the child's feeding skills. So if you see, most of the time we do this, we have this thing of pressure, or when we do pressure the child to have the food because of many influence, mostly because that, maybe the cultural influence or the influence from the family members. Most of the time it can come from the mother-in-law saying that, that your child is not growing, you do need to do something. And it can be from your friends or the cousins who are saying that the child is not growing, I think you're not giving enough food. So the parents get stressed up, and the parents try to force feed the child, but without looking at the child's response or child's need. So what studies have shown is that when you force feed the child, it's going to backfire. They found that when mostly it happens with fruits and vegetables, because that's we want the child to be more healthy. So fruits and vegetables is one area we can do that, provide that nutrition. As the parents do that, the child will have less interest in having those food items. So the child will prefer not to eat that food, or child will reduce interest in that. So when you increase the pressure, the child will go back, and the child will shows less interest to eat those food. And eventually that's going to affect the parent-child relationship. So which is not that we want. So again, so at this moment, I want to go back to the other previous slide about parenting style. What kind of parenting style are we incorporating? So if you want to know, if you know more about the parenting style, it is important for us to go back to the first presentation, which Miraculin presented about different types of parenting style and impact on the child's feeding skills. In particular, I want to talk about authoritative parenting style, where the parents have parent keeps high standard in terms of feeding. They know what the child want to have, but at the same time, they are very responsive. Then they look at the child's cues, what the child is trying to say, and they respond back properly to the child. So that is kind of a parenting style we need to adopt. So you can learn more about different kinds of parenting styles from the other previous presentation. So if you see, yes, pressure backfires. Another important factor here we need to understand is that, the more pressure you want to put on the child, it's going to affect the child's psychological development, which we don't see, which we don't take care of properly. So which we don't really want the child to go through. So this is another common strategy that our culture does often, which is like giving a reward. When you finish the food, I'll give you candy. Or when you finish when you finish this dish, I will let you do that. So food has become more of a reward system. And what can happen is that when you reward the child to have some kind of food, eventually the child will show less interest to have the food that you want to make the child have, and the child will prefer to eat the reward food. Let's say the child will prefer to eat more the reward food, which is the candy here. So rewarding, again, is not a right approach, and it can affect the child's interest in having food. So these are some of the factors which we don't take it very seriously, but it can have a great impact on child's feeding skills. All right, so we have the next one is the family health climate. So again, we don't really talk about much in comes to feeding, because we usually think that feeding, it always goes with the mother, father, and the child, but it is not. Feeding goes beyond that. It is more of a family involvement. Why? Because usually when it comes to feeding, I've seen that it's more of the mother-child relationship. I have seen that the parents are involved, and let's say the father or the significant partner is less involved in the feeding, this feeding relationship. So what happens is the mother feels more stressed because the child is not having the food, and the father is not involving much into that. So what kind of goal are you having in your family? That's something we need to look at. Of course, every family have an importance of having good, every family want to have a healthy family, right? Like in terms of nutrition, have a good nutrition, do more, adopt more health strategies at home, like we eat more healthy food, are we having more exercises at home? All these factors can have an impact on feeding. And in that particularly, I want to talk about the family values. what family values are we having in terms of food? Are we eating more healthy food, or are we eating more unhealthy food? When you go for shopping, are we buying more healthy food items, or are we buying more unhealthy food items? And when it comes to shared perception, how do you look at difficult challenges in your family? Or do you have a good what to say, good, like, how do you have a common perception in when you face the challenges? And when it comes to psychosocial factors, like, how do you resolve conflicts within the family or between the family members? And how do you communicate with each other? And how emotionally you are connected within the family members? All these things can have a great impact on the family. Eventually, it can impact on the child's mental health, and also it can affect the child's feeding, which we usually don't see much. So it is very important that when it comes to management, we don't just we need to look into these factors also, not just the eating part. So we're going to look at family meals. Studies have shown that family meals, exposing the child to have more family meals, will improve the child to have more healthy food intake. And when the child have fewer family meals, then child will have the chances that the child will take more unhealthy meals. So which is something which is alarming, and we need to make into consideration, and to have more family meals together, so the child can share the family values together. Child can see what the parents are eating, and are we eating more healthy food items, or are we eating more unhealthy food items? How often are we adding sugar or any fried items in that? So of course the child will follow that. So because we are giving the model to the child. So, and that is something we need to take into consideration. And most often we see that when the child eat the food, or when you have a family meal, the child must be watching TV, or maybe Cocomelon on the phone, or things like that, which can also have a negative impact on child's feeding, because studies have shown that the child will overeat the food without realizing the child's own hunger cues, so which is not a right thing to have. So if social media can have a negative impact on the child's feeding skills, because that will eventually, because you're not communicating within the family when you're having a family meal, because this is distracting. So distractions, so like this kind of distractions, something we need to avoid when you have family meals. Okay, so we are now looking at sensory system. How sensory system, like how food is related to the sensory system. This is something I think most of the parents and professionals also know, but we need to look at this we need to look into more into the sensory system, because how the food looks, how the food feels like when the child touches the food, and also how does the food smell, and how does it sound when the child puts inside the mouth and child bites it? How does it sound, and how does it taste? All these things matters when in terms of preferring the food. That's why when it most of the children, they prefer to eat more of chips and more of biscuits, because they get that sensory feeling, auditory sensation. So they would prefer to eat more. And studies have shown that when it comes to vegetables, children prefer to eat more vegetables which are crispy, like celery and those kind of vegetables, because it is more crispy, and the child get that sensory feedback back to the system. So all this sensory system, these individual parts have an impact on child's sensory food preference. So looking at all these factors, now we must be thinking that who can help? So I like this picture, because in this picture, you can see several pictures are trying to fix a puzzle. Yes, feeding issue is dealing with feeding issue is not an easy task. It is an involvement of several parties, several members, and each of them has to put their own part to fix this puzzle. And those parties are pediatrician, parents, of course, speech language pathologist, an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, social worker, and a dietitian. So a pediatrician will really look into the medical management side, because in the first slide, we saw that where the child is having some medical issues, let's say acidity, or we call it as GERD. And if the child has any gut issues, or the child having any other respiratory issues, so that can be dealt by a pediatrician. And then comes the parents. The parents are the person who's involving this practice of the therapy strategies, which Sarah will be discussing in the upcoming slides. And parents are again an integral part in the sensory system. Then comes the speech language pathologists, like in SLPs, are the ones who incorporate the feeding practices in strategies, so that the children strategies in the sessions to work on the skills. Occupational therapists will work on the fine motor skills and provide sensory integration. A physiotherapist will work on, again, the gross motor and also some part of the fine motor skills. Then social worker work more on that family function with the parents, so that we can all work on this particular goal, which is supporting the feeding skills. And then comes the dietitian, who help the parents to find appropriate nutrition, find food options for diets which can be appropriate and nutritious for the child to have, because that is the most important part in terms of food intake or eating, so that the child can have the adequate nutrition, adequate development. And when the child get adequate nutrition, the child's development will improve, the academic skills improve, the child's social function improves. So all these things are really connected to each other. So, and if we see, now most of the time we see feeding as at the top of that iceberg, but we don't really see what is happening underneath that. So there are several factors which matters for us to reach there, reach onto the top. So we need to make sure the child get the appropriate behavioral support, and then gross motor and fine motor skills, and the child have appropriate physiological status. When all these things factors are well connected and functions well, the child will have successful feeding. And when you, at this moment, you must be understanding that when any of this factor doesn't work well or having an issue, it can impact the child's feeding skills. So, and looking at all these things, now it's time for us to look at the management side of the feeding, like what are the strategies that we can work to help the child to practice all these things and to reach the top of that iceberg, or to have the successful feeding.
All right, thank you everyone for joining with us. I hope are the slides clear? You're able to see it? All right, so I'm going to quickly go into the management part of it, and I'm going to try to bring in whatever Abhishek has been talking for so long and try to see what are some of the strategies that we can use to make it work for our children. I know many parents that are here have children who have developmental disabilities, or who have, who are children who are on the spectrum, and you all find it really hard to, how do I deal with this and how do I go forward? So when it comes into the primary things, what are we looking at? There are just few things that I really want to highlight and I want us to understand. We have been talking about a lot of things over the last 4 weeks, and this is very important for you all to understand that we incorporate all of this together to make it work. So every child is different. Every child facing a feeding difficulty, or a child who, as we look at it, we say, oh, they're just being picky, or they don't want to eat. These kids all have difficulties, and we really need to understand why, like how Abhishek mentioned, that there is an underlying cause. There is a reason why these children are going through this. And it is important when we assess and when we manage that we try to bring all of this together. if we try to see that it's not, we can never say that it's one shoe that fits all. Our main goal together, the entire team, whether it's your doctors, whether it's the parents, whether it's your therapists, our main thing is how can we make sure that nutrition is going in safely for our children? That's what we're trying to work on. So without building, that's what, it's not just about putting food into the mouth. There's a whole lot of trust that needs to come, and there's a whole lot of readiness between the child and the parent that needs to happen. A lot of medical stability. We did cover a lot of medical issues that Abhishek was talking about. And, those things need to be sorted before we can even go into getting food into our mouth. So bringing all of this together is very, very, very important. Now, there might be some children who have severe feeding difficulties, and please do not just take and say, okay, this is what they're telling us to do and let's try all of these. Sometimes the children can have choking and gagging. We have to know very importantly that that's what, when we say it's an individualized approach, it does not fit everybody. That is why it's very important to know that if a child does have medical issues coming up where nutrition is not going in adequately through the mouth, there are other possibilities that we need to consider, and that goes hand in hand with your therapist, and the doctors will be explaining that to you. So please do not just try to say that this works for my child, let me go ahead and do it. Very important. Another thing that comes into picture is when we're looking at the medical stability, when we are trying to figure out what to do. Like Abhishek mentioned, the child can have gut issues, can have allergies, can have trauma around food. Okay, the child can have a lot of physiological issues that are coming. When those things come, we need to treat that first. Now, none of us like the feeling of, having a bad tummy, or if we keep puking out food, none of us would even want to try it. It's the same thing. The thing that I want us to understand is the same way we deal with food is the same thing that happens with our children. If we have a bad stomach, we are not going to want to eat. That's the same thing that happens with kids who have gut issues, the same thing with children who have allergies. They have so many responses that's happening that they just will stay away from food. And we think it's just them. We don't understand it because sometimes they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to tell us that there's something going on, there's something wrong inside their system. And that's why it is very, very important to make sure that all of these factors are taken care of before we even go into feeding. So we haven't even reached the part about putting food into the mouth, because we're still trying to make sure that everything else, all the underlying conditions are taken care of before we can even try. So it is very important that everybody understands the difficulties that come along. If the child has trauma around food, if like I mentioned before, if the child has been force-fed and ends up vomiting, and there's always something that's related. Every time the child leaves the child and ends up vomiting, the child is definitely not going. The sight of food, or the sound, just seeing food coming in front of, it's like, no, I don't want to do it. And you'll see a lot of our kids have that, and we don't understand it because we push it aside thinking that, no, it's okay, they're supposed to eat. We just want the food to somehow go in to the mouth. So it is very, very important that all of these factors come in together to make sure that we are, making sure that our children are able to eat well. When we're looking at readiness, Abhishek did bring up that factors of where the parents and where the child, it's two different aspects that we need to bring all of this where our child is regulated. Now, we're going to again be talking about relationships. We're talking about RDI, and we're going to be talking about how we guide relationships, how parents can have meaningful relationships with their children in the upcoming webinar. So please do stay tuned for that. But some things, even when it comes into feeding, like how we mentioned, if you see your child backing off and not wanting to eat, it's not you trying to go and try to force feed them. Our main goal is we want the parents to be successful in trying to get food into, get the child to have nutritious food. And also we want the child to feel successful. Every time, we're forcing the food into the child's mouth, or every time we're not listening to what the child wants to say, we're giving them the idea that no, that we can't communicate, no, that they're not understanding, and you're trying to push them down. That's very, very important that our children are regulated. Our child knows that, okay, we can have a participation with, and mama or dada is going to understand what I'm trying to say, or they're going to understand from my body language that this is what I mean. Yeah. And they need to have. So if the child does not have the required oromotor sensory development that is there in the mouth, you cannot expect your child to be eating. We overlook this thinking, okay, that's like how Abhishek mentioned, the gross motor and fine motor. We overlook the entire body and we think, okay, let's stuff food into the mouth. My child is not eating, ma'am. There is so many difficulties that's happening in the child's body, and we are expecting them just to eat and put food into the mouth. It doesn't work that way. So it is very, very important that we, bring. So some things that I would generally recommend, to prepare a child in is we're going to go into some details of how we can make food a little more fun, where we can explore. It is not just about eat what's on your plate. I will be giving up some ideas. And also for parents, it's very important for you all to realize is, I understand it can be very, very stressful when your children don't eat. I understand that it can, but work along with us when you are, how do I work with this? We keep our expectations. We understand that, the more you get stressed out, you're going to show your stress onto the child. And it's a cycle. It's a very vicious cycle that's going to affect. So it is very, very, very important that you understand this is what my child's difficulties are. So it helps you stay calm and it helps you working on, because you want your child to succeed. We're not looking at our child, like, okay, child is not eating. We're not going to keep them away from food. We want them to be able to explore food. We all enjoy food. Why is it, it's not just about, it's an experience that we all share, right? Every time. Why do we go to different restaurants? Why? We love the whole aspect of just eating, because it just helps us in so many ways. So it's the same thing for our kids, but we need to figure out how to go about it for them. The moment there is a negative, feeling or an emotion attached to food, your child is not going to want to try it. And that's why it's very, very important to understand that you always have to be in tune with your children to understand that I need to understand from my child's body language, from what my child is trying to show me. Is the child accepting the food? Is the child not accepting the food? Okay, how do I work about it? So we will be going into some more approaches. So that's where the whole trust comes. Imagine if you are the parent. I know all of us have had experiences where we've had food shoved right into our mouths, or somebody comes and holds us and, food is just put in. You keep doing that. And especially for our children who have so many other difficulties. I'm not just talking, there are children who are, who are typically normal and who have these difficulties, but also for our kids who are on the spectrum, or our kids who have developmental disabilities. You are creating that place, you need to create that place where they feel physically and emotionally safe to come and want to sit next to you, to come and do that. And that's where we talk about relationship-based interventions. And, we will be talking about it in the upcoming webinars. So, and, like I said before, responsive feeding. Can I, look at my child and my child is moving back? That means, okay, I understand that he doesn't want food, or he doesn't want that particular kind of food. So what else can I do for that? Building that trust with your child is some of the most basic things that we need. It is not just, that's why we said it is more than just eating. It is not just putting food into your mouth. There's so many aspects that need to come together. I always tell all of my parents, put yourself in your child's shoes. Would you like somebody coming and stuffing food into your mouth? No. Then why do we expect our children to do it and be okay with it and, have no emotional or psychological trauma associated with it? We don't like it. It's the same way for them. They just don't know how to express it out or say it in words, or they might have other difficulties, and it's our job to find out and make it easier for them. So be able to read your cues. That's one of the biggest things that I would tell all parents is start noticing. You might see that your child is interested in one food item. Okay, hey, he's exploring. He wants to try that some more. I will be giving you some more ideas on how we can make sure that our children, try to eat some more. When we talk about individualized approach, that is, it is separate. It is different for each and every child. It is not the same. Like how we've been talking about, we spoke about body awareness. If you all have not seen the last couple of webinars that today we're on our 4th one. So there are 3 webinars. Please go check out our YouTube channel, because we do talk about the body awareness. We do talk about the sensory issues that the children can have. And if there is a difficulty where the child has, like Abhishek also mentioned, where there's a lot of issues in terms of sensory issues, you are not going to get the child to eat food. If the child has a difficulty in terms of even wanting to touch the food, or even wanting to smell, or any of this, all of our 7 senses working together, if the child is against it, you're not going to expect it to go into the child's mouth. So it is very important that every approach we'll be looking at. So if the child cannot motor plan, like, how Abhishek mentioned about your big body movements. If the child can't do all of that, the child is just slouching on the chair and not wanting to put, you're going to have difficulties in terms of swallowing. You're going to have difficulties in motor movements. So it is very, very important. Like, we mentioned that the environment is made in such a way and the sensory things are taken into consideration because it plays a very, very important part. So I'm going to be looking at I'm going to give you all a few tips here and there. So please do, try to see, if these work out with your children. We want to make it practical. We want to make it something for you all to understand. If a child has sensory difficulties, and most of our children on the spectrum, especially for those parents who have children on the spectrum, it is very important to understand that if your child has sensory difficulties overall on child's body, you can definitely expect that there will be some sensory issues when it comes into the smaller muscles of the mouth. So when that happens, your first job is not, can I try to push food down? But it's try to can I meet the child's sensory needs? Because that is more important. So for that to do, I need to be able to get them to understand. So I'm going to be looking at a few things. Food is a friend. We all love food. And, we enjoy it, and we need to make sure that our kids enjoy it. And that's how we get them to want to try out more. We get them wanting to explore more. And that is very, very important. Like Abhishek said, pressure backfires. Do not try to blackmail them. Say, okay, you do this, I'm going to take you out. You do this, I know it gets frustrating when your child doesn't eat, but there are ways around it. It is not a overnight thing that changes and okay, I fixed all of this. My child is going to start eating now. No. We have to go through the process. It can get frustrating. That's why it's very important to work. You have a team of people that work with you and give you ideas on how to go about it. Eliminate the pressure. It's okay. If you don't eat, it's okay. But can we at least try? Those are very important things that we need to bring in. Create positive experiences. Like, Abhishek spoke about family experiences. We always keep them in front of the TV and okay, eat. We just somehow, because we just want the food to go in. But more importantly than that, if we create a positive experience around food, if they see, oh, my parents are playing with me, I'm enjoying it. And, they see you guys getting involved, and it just creates a positive atmosphere where they will even want to come and try out more food. And playing with food. I know this is something that we have been, especially in our Indian culture, we are dead against for generations together, where we've been told, don't waste your food, don't waste your food. That's the culture that we've been taught. But if you want, especially children who have these difficulties, you want them to want to even put it into their mouth. They need to be able to play with, they need to be able to explore with the food. So I'm going to be looking at I'm going to give you a few techniques that you can do in terms of, using your senses. That's something that we spoke about. We spoke about how your vision, your smell, your taste, your touch, your hearing. Abhishek mentioned that all of these senses come together for us to eat. We all do. If we see a nicely, a plate that looks really nice to eat, or you go to a very fancy restaurant, that's, a lot of restaurant people, they make a lot of money just because of the way things smell and see. It might not even be about the taste, because you eat with your eyes. That's what they say. No, you feast with your eyes. If your plate is, imagine that, if you have an entire plate of food, just randomly, just put there and it's just overstuffed. It can be so overwhelming for our children, especially those who have sensory difficulties. They look at like, am I supposed to eat all of this? It's supposed to go in and you're like, eat. It doesn't work that way. It is very, very, very important to make sure that you've got a plate. Even if you use small plates, putting little by little, the first thing is let them see. It doesn't necessarily have to go into the mouth. But when you're working on, can I make the plate more visualizing? Can they see it? And can it be more appealing to them? You don't need to add a lot of things. Can I add a few things? Can I just offer small portions on my plate? And making sure they might not touch it on the first day, but it's okay. Like we were talking the other day, we said the child might not want to even, touch chutney because it just looks weird and they don't want to eat it with their idli. It just starts with putting a little bit of chutney in a small katori and keeping it on the plate. Keep doing that over and over again, where you get their interest, where you build it. Okay, this looks like something. Can we try it again? So simple things like that, where the plate is appealing, where you don't have a lot of food on the plate, but the child is able to see and it doesn't overwhelm them. That is very, very important when it comes to vision. When it comes to the smell, another thing that we need to realize is our kids are very, very their sensory systems are either, mostly on time, it's either on an overload, or it's generally very low. So it's very important that when you give foods that have really strong sense, we generally forget this when we deal. We think that, okay, all of it's aroma, it's normal for us, food tastes normal like this. But for our children, sometimes it can be very, very overwhelming. It is very, very important that, we take that into consideration. One thing that I generally say is that sometimes warm foods, like, hot foods is what gives a lot of the aroma out. So, a simple thing where you can make sure that the aroma is not too strong is cool the food down. As you cook it, it's fresh, but cool the food down. So maybe it's not, when you see a child going, not wanting to smell it and not wanting to touch it, can we cool the food down a bit before we even put it in there? No, I need you to eat. So those are some things where it gets, because emotions get connected very easily. We all have memories with, you talk about, oh, in my childhood days, I ate this and my mom made that. We all have experiences and emotions and memories that are connected. That's the same thing that we want to do for our children. That is very, very important. So for smell also, I would say generally avoid, giving immediately very warm food, because the steam carries the smell and that immediately hits their nose, and that can cause difficulties for them. When we come into taste, we want our children to be able to, taste different textures. And you might see that, like Abhishek was mentioning, that they might have certain tastes that they like. But we don't go immediately and try, okay, no, you have to. It's okay. It's okay if they don't like the taste of certain things. For us, it's just about making sure that they are able to at least explore with it. That is very, very important. It's not about, they might not like the taste of the taste of apple. It doesn't start by trying to give them a whole slice of apple. Can we just try it? Okay, even if he's bitter, can we try to taste it at least once before we go into it? So even if they don't like it, they need to know that they don't like that. And we understand and we respond to that cue. So when you're trying new foods, you tell them, hey, it's okay. It's something new. It tastes a little different. And you explain that to them. So it is very, very important when it comes to taste and flavor, that it's things that our children are able to, understand. When it comes to touch, something very, very, very important that I tell parents is that, especially with our children, is if they can't touch it, especially because our fingers, they're all you've got high sensory receptors on your palms and on your fingers. If our child cannot touch it, they're not going to want to put it inside their mouth. That's where it is very, very important that you give them food. It's okay if they get messy, we can clean it up. The long run is we want our children to be eating healthy. We want our children to be enjoying the foods that they eat. Let them touch their food. Let them get messy. If you want to make sure that they just, not having their clothes on, so that you let them get messy. You can give them a bath later. It's okay. But let them get messy with the food. Let them play around with it. The moment that they start playing around with it, they start exploring. And that's very, very important. When it comes to hearing, this is something that we don't really realize. It's we all have our auditory system. We can hear. When we eat crunchy foods, we know that this is what we're eating. We all hear it back into our ear. That's the feedback that we get. Sometimes for our kids, it can be very, very overwhelming. Those sounds can be. So don't immediately go. When you see that your child is becoming, that's where, again, I'm saying responsive feeding. It is very important to understand the cues that your child is giving you. Present food in very, very small sizes, sample sizes. You don't have to give them okay, today my child, I want him to eat 1 plate of rice. No, they might not want to. Can I give them small sample bites? Like how we go to the supermarkets and they all give us 1 sample bite. Small samples. Get them to try it first before trying to put it into, push it down and say that, no, you have to eat it. That's very important. Playing with food. This is where it all happens. And I think for all of our children, they enjoy this. Find out ways that it can be just trying to mix the pulses, playing. It's a lot of sensory activities, but you're doing it with food. And it is very, very important that we do that. We explore, we cut, you can cut and paint with vegetables. They get to have messy play with creams. They, get to add a little bit of food coloring into it. And they get to, that is how we make sure that our children are able to play with food, and that gets them to explore. That is very, very important. I'm going to give you three E's. This is by Melanie Potter. She says these 3 E's: expose, explore, and expand. It does it before the food even reaches the person's mouth. Can I get the child to just be exposed? Sharing a meal together, involving the child in while you're cooking, get them in to just maybe come and take, washing the fruits, washing the vegetables. All of these things go a long way. Research says that it takes at least 18 to 15 times of exposing something to a child before we can get them to even start eating it. That's why it's so important that they don't have to necessarily eat it in the first go. Can I just get them to play along with it? Can I just expose my child to food? Can I get them? So she does simple things like, you can play X and zero, tic-tac-toe, how, we show with food. Let them just touch it, hold it. It's not going into their mouth. Let them just play with it, exposing them to that, exploring. This never ends. You can explore different aspects. You bring in the senses. Ooh, I can smell that. Everything has a different smell. It's got a different taste, different texture. Get your children to explore that and start talking about it. This makes your children, this makes children want, okay, this is something different. Mama is eating something new. That's where shared family meal experiences come in, where your child, let them just sit with you. It's okay that even if they don't eat what you're eating, but when they see you eating, you start building in curiosity. You start working on getting them, okay, there is something new, can we try? And then you put a small dollop or a small teaspoon on their plate. They might just start, exploring and start eating it. That's how it's very, very important that we do it. Exploring never ends. And with the amount of the information that we have that is put out for us, there is so much that you can do with food. You get so many creative ideas that you can do to get your children, wanting or getting them to get curious enough to try out something new. Expanding. This is something that do not rush. That's what I would tell in this place. Start when your child is okay. Maybe if in the beginning, the child is not even, cannot even stand the sight of that particular food, bring it and let it just be on the table. It doesn't have to go onto their plate. You start exploring. And the next thing is, can we cook together? Can we use small, let's go and let's serve it for Papa. Let's serve it for Mama. Can we go put it on Didi's plate? Simple things like that. It's not going into their mouth. They know it's safe. It's not coming into them. But you start doing that, and then once you see that your child is relaxed and is able to, is calm and comfortable with it, then you start trying. Then they will start expanding and trying to taste food. Very, very small bites. Do not go in for a whole chunk of it or a whole plate of it in the first go. It does not work that way for our children. We want our children to be able to enjoy food. Nutrition needs to go in, and there are ways that we work around with it. Now, very, very briefly, we did cover this last week. We were talking about motor planning. If you missed it, please go back and watch the video. We did talk about sensory difficulties in terms of speech and feeding and motor difficulties. If our child has sensory difficulties, it just starts with, before food can go in, there's so many textures. Can we start with simple massages, different things? Again, I'm not going into a lot of detail. It's using different textures of cloth. It's using different temperatures, tastes, different textures. Even in textures, we think, oh, it's all the same. Food is all the same. You've got pureed foods, which are completely soft to hard crunchy. You've got different textures. Let them get exposed and comfortable with it. So giving them simple sensory massages on the oral cavity, that is on the outside first. Again, everything starts external. External, when I say it starts away from the child's body and then it comes closer to the child's mouth. That's how, if you get the child comfortable to hold the food, that's your first step. Can I get, bring it closer? Okay, now can I take and try? Can I just keep it on my lip? Can I try it into my mouth? It's a process. It takes time. You cannot directly go into the mouth. So again, with sensory difficulties, there are a lot of massages that we teach just to get them desensitized enough to try and explore something new. So we have a lot of tools that we use different bean bags, we use different towels and textured cloths, we use oils, creams, powder, finger brushes. There's a lot of things that we use. Again, how to use it, it's very important that you just don't do it by yourself, but you do take in professional advice on how to go about it and how to do it. That is very, very important. I did talk about this. I'm not going to go into details about this, but I did speak about this last week where you said that there is a hierarchy in place. There is motor movements that are required. So as soon as a child is born, you're not expecting them to eat off a spoon, or you're not expecting them to start biting and chewing immediately. They start with just opening and closing their mouths, or just trying to take a bottle, or trying to breastfeed. So everything, even feeding, has a normal development. Every part of our body has a normal development that goes on. And it's very, very important that we understand the normal development so that we can use it for our children. Being able to, by 19 to 24 months, they should be able to round their lips slowly and start in for straw, to be able to drink from a straw or, drink from a cup. Being able to, eat from a spoon. These are all, and these all use different parts of our, like we spoke in motor planning, it's different parts of the muscles in our mouth that are moving for that. If I have to eat off a spoon, my lips need to move and close on the spoon and clear the things off the spoon. If our child has a motor issue in that and they can't do it, if my child can't close their lips and, separately move it, your child is not going to eat off a spoon. It's simple as, it's for us to understand that if my child is not able to round her lips, if there is a motor difficulty of being able to go, ooh, you can't expect your child to drink off a straw. So that's why it's very, very important for us to understand that there is a motor development that happens, and we need to be able to understand and see where our child is and see how we can move forward in that. So when we look at oromotor difficulties that our children have, it is very, very important that we work on, like I said last week, working on getting them to separately just create movement, creating movements of the jaw, creating movements of the lips, the tongue, the cheek, separately. We all just take in food, we push it into our mouth, we think it's just, okay, the child is not. If the child can't move the tongue, the child is not going to even know how to move the food around from the left to the right or try to push it back to swallow. The child can have difficulties in that. So we work on it. There is a particular way that we need to work on it. We directly, go back and please do watch the last week's video. We don't directly just jump into, okay, let me get the child to eat from the tongue. We need to work on separate movements of the jaw, of the lips and the tongue, working on getting them, even in those moments, how big, okay, now a big mouth of food is coming in. How big do I need to open my mouth? How small do I need to open my mouth? All of those things are graded movements that my child can do. Again, children who have motor difficulties, we're working on them to improve their strength, their stability and endurance. Once these muscles are able to do it, if I can keep moving my muscles and go, I can do this, it makes it easier for my child to drink from a straw. It is creating that muscle memory that is very, very important. So I hope these things really, you're able to understand and you're, okay, my child does have these difficulties. Now, how do I work on it? This is just the tip of the iceberg. What we both have shared right now is just the tip of the iceberg of, how feeding and how important it is. And it is very, very important. One end note, if I had to leave you all with, what I'm saying is that food is a friend. To make it a positive experience for your children, don't go directly into the mouth. Start away, start slow, start simple, and you will see changes around food with your child.
All right, we'll take some questions now. There are 3 questions. First is, when I'm feeding rice and vegetables to my daughter, she takes the rice and vegetables from the mouth and again she keeps it inside, like she takes it out and then she keeps it back, and for every bite she does that.
So there are
the question is, how do they stop it? Yeah.
How do we stop it? That's the thing, like everyone wants to know how to stop it, because because we need to look at several underlying factors. What this could be, like many domains are here, like she will also add her points. Something I want to say here is that we need to look at the behavioral side. Is there any behavioral involvement there, or is it something to do with the sensory area? Is it because of sensory profile, or is it to do with the motor programming, motor planning? So these are 3 things that I would be looking at, and so that if there is any issues in these sites, this could be the reason why the child must be having or exhibiting that behavior. So there is always some reason.
Yeah.
So we need to look into the reason first in order for us to work on that part. So, and I think we would suggest that, and it would be really great if you can do an assessment, a comprehensive assessment involving the parties which I have discussed before, including occupational therapists and all other disciplinaries. So to come up with to identify what is the issue, and so that we can work on that. So would you like to?
My daughter chews hard food with side molar teeth and smooth food with front teeth, or hard food like nuts, carrots. She makes pieces by molar and again start eating with front teeth. While chewing, she does not close lips also.
Again, I think this would again come into, there looks like there might be some sensory issues. There definitely are. If you're saying the child is not able to close the lips, there are some motor issues involved. So we would definitely say that you can't fix this immediately by just giving food. You'll have to work on creating, desensitizing the child and seeing if there is a sensory issue, and also working on creating those motor movements that are needed. We don't really understand how important is chewing, even opening and closing our jaw. All of these sensations that are there, we take it for granted, but our children are really struggling with this. So creating those motor patterns before we even go into food is very, very important.
Hi, ma'am. So my 8-year-old kid avoids grainy structured food. It started from past 6 months, like idli and rava items. What could be the reason and how to avoid it?
So again, that for me, I would say that there is some sensory issue involved. If the child is avoiding it, there's something that's going on. It's a particular texture. That means that the child is not liking it or is not liking the feel of how it feels inside the mouth, and that's why they avoid it. Now, do I directly directly go in and try to put that food right into mouth? Again, no, we work on, like how we mentioned before, simple strategies that are used to try to get it. So Shelly ma'am, would you like to?
So I just want to add, because you said that the child is eating before and now she's suddenly not eating, is what the question is saying. It started from the past 6 months and the child is already 8 years old. So it need not be just sensory alone that suddenly come in. You might need to go a little deeper and see if there are some gut issues that are causing it, that she's feeling uncomfortable around this whenever she eats it. All I'm saying is dig a little deeper. Not everything is sensory.
Yes.
So although we do talk about sensory a lot, please do understand not everything is sensory. And a lot of it stems from the gut. And the gut is our second brain. And so if we are uncomfortable in our gut, we're going to avoid certain types of food. So just something to think about.
My 11-year-old son with ASD eats very fast. Within 5 minutes, he finishes all the food. Many times, overstuffing with food. Please advise what.
So I'm again just going to bring in a few viewpoints.
I said yes.
Yeah. Okay. So for a child who's eating very fast, the first thing that I think of when a child is overstuffing is the child stuffs because not really able to feel enough in their mouth. That is why you see overstuffing. So again, it could be a sensory issue in terms of I'm not able to feel enough. So example is if you don't feel your leg is numb, you will not walk. If you get pins and needles under your leg, you still will not walk. So if we do not feel the right sensations, we will not create the right movement patterns. Just take it that way. Now the child is stuffing his mouth. When he stuffs, then he starts feeling the food better in his mouth. Is that why he's doing it? Again, this is just we are getting only a very small glimpse into your child's life. So we're just giving suggestions. Again, please don't take it as the end all answer. You are welcome to always communicate with us further. You have our contact details. If you want to, talk to us more. But based on just what you have written, we can give you little bits of information, a bit of information to explore is what I would suggest. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to just interrupt, Shirin. Co-regulation is required here. Overstuffing, co-regulation is required. Other than sensory and co-regulation.
So there were a couple of hands raised. I thought Rishikesh and Subhashri, are they still there?
Yeah, hello, ma'am. My child is 6.5 years old, and since we are new to this program, we didn't know about this. And as you said, we have been force feeding him for quite some time now. Now, to start with, like he's 6.5 years old, and we are initially it was force feeding, then we came down to showing him video clips, audio clips, and then keeping him feeding. But now, as you said, we have to present the food in small quantity. Then we have to show, we have to do the food plays. that we are doing. But how do we take care of the nutrition then? Or how do we be sure that he's not starving? Or then how long can it go that he starves? Or the next question is it a good idea to make him starve and then do these kind of activities? So how do we go forward from here?
So I would suggest that, at this moment, it is important why the child is not, preferring to have. So we need to look at the sensory part and also the sensory motor area. If there's any issue that we need to look at, so then we can take the appropriate management. And again, so when it comes to nutrition, so it is important for us to work with our dietitian also, so that we can get the right appropriate kind of food items which the child prefers to eat. Maybe if it's a texture, so if it's a let's say the child is having more of a particular kind of texture, the child eats only that, then we can try to find food items which can really support, which is more nutritious in that format with the help of a dietitian. So that's something that I would suggest.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that we definitely do not say, do not starve your children. Please do not do that.
Yeah.
We need them to have nutrition because that is your quality of life. If you want them to thrive, you need them to have food. But again, you can find ways. There's definitely going to be subtleties. We're not going to say that it'll work for everybody. There will be some things that your child prefers. There'll be some texture, there'll be some taste, there'll be something that your child prefers. And it's working around that of what your child likes and seeing, okay, can I get something in through that? Now, if your child only takes in liquids and not yet has started solid food, now can I get nutrition going in that way? But at the same time, I am working on getting the sensory, the motor, all of these issues working so I can get him to start eating solid food. This is, again, it is not overnight. It does not happen in one day. It is a process. It takes time. So I would definitely say, do not, it's in our mind that, okay, this is, I can only, if my child eats only rice, the child is going to be, have good food or whatever. There are different ways. It's just about finding what works for your child. That's why it's very, very important to be in contact with a team to work. It is a very individualistic thing. It does not work. One thing does not work for all. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question. The thing is, in our children, generally they are allergic to a lot of food. So we had done the allergy test for him also. So when it comes to searching for various possibilities of different kind of food that he likes. Now in our case, he likes to eat chocolates, but then he is allergic to chocolates. So that experiments also take a toll. And we cannot do that food play or the thing he likes. And because of that, then it leads to constipation. So it is kind of a catch-22 situation for us as to what to do. And then finally, we come down to resorting to the same thing, that showing him some videos and blending the food in the mixture and then giving it back to him. So, yeah.
First thing, before you even look at anything else, the child needs to eat. So if the videos are the way you're going to do it. I'm not saying don't do it, take it off completely, because the child still needs to eat. He has to have nutrition.
Yeah.
Okay. But you have to be conscious about the things that you're going to add into that mix so that gradually the video can be faded out and the child gets a sense of self and what he can do and what he can achieve with that food. And that's why simultaneously you need to work with a few things. So yes, you can use the videos as a starting step if you need to, if there's no other way to get food in, because at the end of it, food needs to go in. I even have 5-6-year-olds who are still on the feeding bottle because they cannot eat anything. They gag in front of food. If they see, they gag when parents are eating it. So there are different cases. So what we do is we start with what they're comfortable with, as long as food is going in, whether it's in the pureed form, whatever form. And then, but simultaneously, we start working on other areas so that the child gets more confident around food and food becomes a friend, as Sarah has mentioned in her presentation, with the different kinds of food play, getting them into the kitchen, because a lot of children under the spectrum have an underdeveloped sense of smell. And that is why food is, because that's what we have first: vision, smell, touch. Before touch, the smell and vision have come in. So if that is something that's taking me aback, I'm not going to want to try and taste it. I'm going to be very, anxious around it. So all I'm saying is balance it and have conscious thought about balancing it throughout, so that you can work towards more effective skills.
Got your point. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right. I can see that we still have a lot of questions, but we need to wrap up now.
Let's take two more. Pranjali, let's take two more.
Okay.
We have some hands raised. Dr. Shabnam,
Okay.
I'd like to unmute and ask your question.
All right. Dr.
Hello, ma'am. My 6.5 years old daughter with the global developmental delay with some autism features. Now she is chewing all the objects, but while eating rice, she just swallows. And initially she can chew also kaju, badana, all the badam. But now she likes to hold the object in the mouth and keep it for half an hour in the mouth itself without chewing it.
It's only with rice, is it?
Only rice she swallows, but rest of the object, chapati or something, she chews and then swallows. But rice she swallows.
Again, so I mean, we're looking at, definitely there is some, if this has been happening for a very long time, I'm guessing that again, texture issues where the child is not able to, does not like the feeling of mushy food in the mouth and prefers to just swallow it in, and does not like the sensory part of it. That might be that can be one of the reasons. Again, we'll need to look at different reasons why it might be happening, but this can be one of the reasons that it can be. Again, the texture of the food is very, very important when it comes to this.
But hard objects she can chew, ma'am. Kaju, badam, peanut, groundnut, she chews and then swallow. But
So,
only rice she swallows.
Yeah, so what she's saying is, okay, there are different, again, there's no one answer for you unless we go into more detail. But generally when we see this, what it could mean is, one, that we don't like the texture of the mushy food, so we're just trying to get rid of it as fast as possible, so we just swallow it. The other option is also that I'm not feeling that mushy food so much, and so I tend to swallow it. Whereas when it's crispy, when it's harder texture, I can feel it better in my mouth, so I know I have to chew it. That is also another thing that children go through, and that's why you see them just swallowing mushy food. Now, the kind of management or a simple strategy that we put in place is, we tell parents, you know what, change up the texture of your food. Don't give just the mushy food. Can you put the crispies into the mushy food? So for example, if you're taking chips or namkeens or chutney powders or whatever, basically you're changing up the texture, where this is something I like to do a lot, is I scoop banana chips. You see banana chips, I use that as a spoon and I put that, so they see that the banana chips is coming. Oh wait, something crunchy is coming. So automatically the motor pattern is, I better chew this, otherwise I'm going to choke on it. So the mushy food is just going in there along with the chips to kind of enable the motor plan for the chew. You can change textures up with deep fried vegetables. You can put peanuts, anything they're not allergic to, of course, please look into that too. But these are different reasons that children could be just swallowing. And these were some questions that have come quite a bit in the chat too. So for all those who ask similar questions, these are two reasons, and this is something that you could do to see and explore and see, okay, if I add more texture into the food, do I see a little bit more chewing happening with the rice?
And one more,
I have a query.
Still could not spit and blow.
Well, then you'll have to work on the oromotor skills to get the blow, because the spit is a result of good blowing, because for spit also you need to put pressure and get it out. So blowing is extremely important for a lot of functional skills. It's not like I blow a bubble and then we're done. We need to, and that's what Sarah was talking about last week, about the skills on how to teach them. We cannot teach you over a webinar. So do connect with us if you have difficulties, or connect with someone who's done oral placement therapy or OPT and can guide you through that process.
Okay, about a child who has GDD but can't swallow or bite any food, any texture. but actually you put the food in the child's mouth, he swallows everything. Everything he would swallow. He has he has no choice of food, but there's no biting or chewing at all.
Mhm.
The child is with GD. This is Charlotte here.
Yeah,
GDD. Child is with GDD, 13-year-old.
Question is, how do you develop the chewing? Is that the question?
Yeah, like this. I mean, the child each puts everything you give in the mouth. He puts it. He's learning how to pick food and put it, but there's no biting, there's no chewing at all. It's just swallowing anything. Big, small sensation, hey, nahi. The food bite is small or big or what.
Your answer has come in, you have said it yourself. One, you said reduce sensation. That means what we need to actively work on that. One, the child might not be aware enough in the mouth to know what to do. Two, there are no motor plans. Sensory and motor are closely connected. If the sensory doesn't develop, the motor doesn't develop. If they do not connect with each other, you will not get the skills you need in your mouth. So you need to work on it outside of food. Do not think that I have to teach feeding with food. That was the biggest mistake we make, sometimes as professionals and sometimes as caregivers or parents. We don't start feeding sessions with food. We start feeding sessions with non-food items so that the child feels safe to be able to create the motor patterns. So those are things that still need work. You need to work on sensory, you need to work on the motor to get those foundations, as Sarah mentioned time and again, last week and this week, before you look at those functional skills of speech and feeding. So when there is weakness, especially when a child with GDD, there will be weakness. So these are areas that,
I think gross motor comes first.
Gross, fine, everything. You can work on it parallelly. We're not saying fix the gross and then get to fine, right? We're saying it has to work, but you have to keep in mind the core muscle, the stability of the body, the positioning of the body, the positioning of the head, the mouth, how all of this is working together so that the finer motor skills can develop. And in the mouth also, there are gross skills and there are fine motor skills. So they all need to work together. And that's why we suggest working with someone who's aware of how you can take it step by step, right? Rather than just experimenting there, because it could get dangerous for a child who could aspirate, who could choke if you give them food that they're not ready for. And that's more dangerous. So we are going to stop here because we've had a really long session, and I'm going to hand it over to Pranjali now.
Thank you.
Sarah will be doing the end note.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much. We really hope that, you all have, we've tried to answer as much as possible, but we will get back to those questions we've missed out if we've not answered them. We are going to be posting up these videos, these webinars will be coming up on our social media, especially on our YouTube page. So please, we have put the links on. So please do, join the various social media platforms that are there. So you will keep getting updates about this also. We are going to come back next week again, and we're going to be talking about guiding relationships, and that's with relationship development intervention. We're going to be looking, and that's the base for everything that we speak about. So please do come and join for you all to get a better understanding of the same. So that is it from us. If you do have any further questions, please, you can email us, you can send us a WhatsApp message, call us on our numbers, and we will be more than happy to help you out in all of this. Thank you so much, and have a beautiful day. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.